Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 52 of Humanity Rising. Every day since May 22nd, between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock p.m. Central European Time, Ubiquity University, through Humanity Rising, has essentially provided an open space for people from all over the world to come together to share their experiences as we all navigate through this extraordinary pandemic that has put most of the world in lockdown, most of the world engaging in social distancing, and most of us in the same conversation about how we are going to survive the pandemic and how we're going to shape the world beyond the pandemic, hopefully in a way that's more sustainable and resilient, abundant, healthy, and in alignment with natural systems. Each day we've taken a different tack on the issue, but it's all around ultimately on how the progressive movement, meaning everybody in the world that believes in a better human future, can come together with enhanced effectiveness. I emphasize this because scientists, as all of you know, are saying that we're running out of time to solve the critical indicators at the center of which is runaway climate change, all of which are getting worse, not better. And the world systems are increasingly incapable of absorbing the stress. So between now and 2030, we're entering probably the most crucial decade in the history of humankind. So how we think about the world, how we speak about it, how we act about it is going to determine our fate. And it's the conviction of Humanity Rising and Ubiquity that if we can come together in a spirit of radical collaboration, that we proactively engage with one another across boundaries, across countries, across disciplines, in a creative way, that we can do what is necessary to ensure the continuity of human life on Earth and potentially the birth of a truly sustainable global civilization. Today, we dive into the issue of social entrepreneurship. And this is a very new name for probably the oldest category of human inventiveness. You know, when anthropologists and paleontologists and animal scientists of all kinds try to contemplate what really makes humans different from the other species, they're increasingly hard put to identify anything that truly separates us. They used to think it was language, but it's clear, starting with Jane Goodall, that the animals speak all kinds of languages, and they actually even speak to each other. They thought it was emotion, but it's clear that animals have emotion. In fact, almost everything that we have, most of the other species have in one way or another. But one of the things that distinguishes humanity, not in kind, but in degree, is our resilience and our capacity to adapt. As far as I understand it, we're the only species that has adapted to every nook and cranny around the world. Humans have this amazing ability to not only adapt, but to be resilient. And through our social interconnectivity, come together in creative ways that enable us to create emergent novelty. When we think of entrepreneurship, we normally think of people leaving a company and going out on their own and just creating something that's really cool. It takes off and they create a market niche. Social entrepreneurship, as we'll be discussing today, is when people do that in the social arena. And that is really important, and it may be what saves us. Since the Second World War, there's been literally an explosion in virtually every country around the world of social entrepreneurship. There are tens of millions of NGOs. There are hundreds of millions of people working in all kinds of creative ways. In fact, I think there's probably not an issue confronting humankind that doesn't have dozens or hundreds of social entrepreneurs beavering away night and day, 24/7, 365 to solve the problem. That's part of the genius of our humanity. So that's our program. And I would like to now turn it over to my good friend and colleague, Peter Mary, who is a social entrepreneur, I would say, extraordinaire. That's important because he's the Chief Innovation Officer for Ubiquity University and has masterminded our curriculum and our competency-based learning assessment and credentialing programs. In fact, most of what we do has come from Peter's social entrepreneurial mind. So Peter, I, with delight, turn this program over to you and he'll introduce the panel. And then I would just finally encourage everyone that if you have a question or comment, just write it in the chat or write it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Peter will be following things. The different panelists will be following things and interacting with you. And that will allow us to take in your questions and comments as the conversation unfolds. And that will enrich our dialogue thereby. Thank you, everyone. Peter?
Great, thanks, Jim. Yeah, and before I forget, if you do want to add and share your comments, make sure, and you want everybody to see it, make sure you select all panelists and attendees from the drop down next to 2. It's kind of automatically set to just all panelists. That's very nice for us to see what you're saying, but it'd be great to share it with everybody else. So yeah, good to be back. Social entrepreneurship, yeah, a theme close to my own heart. In fact, I've never been employed by any one organization before, so I've always been engaged in some kind of entrepreneurship, be it from my own initial business doing interactive training in youth work for intercultural learning through to Engage, company I had with a couple of other people, including Tatiana, who's on the panel today, and then set up a next level of organization called Innovate that was around taking an integral approach to organizational change, and then the biggest venture so far being Ubiquity. Oh, people saying they can't see me yet. Rick, can you kind of stick me on the screen? There we go. There we go. I should have done it. And why is social entrepreneurship so important at this time in our collective history? Well, what we know about these moments, these non-linear change moments, where the old system is breaking down and the new system is trying to break through, is that we can't predict what the new system is going to look like from where we are now. It's always a non-linear tipping point. Then suddenly at some point it emerges. And what is really important as we're trying to create the conditions for the new to emerge is that really there's massive research and development, R&D, experimentation carried out by the change agents who are seeing this possible future, seeing that something needs to change, and trying all sorts of different solutions and to seeing what fits. And that's far more appropriate to be done in a kind of entrepreneurial context than for governments to do that, because we all know governments are risk averse and slow moving, and it's in the business context that you can really try stuff. If it doesn't work, it fails, you try something else. So that's the spirit of the entrepreneur, to really be able to experiment with things, see what fits the need, adapt as it goes along. If it doesn't work, let it go and move on to the next thing. So this social entrepreneurship movement that we've really seen coming to the fore over the last maybe decade or so. Before that, people maybe didn't even really know the term, is really an important signal for how humanity is starting to respond to the challenges that we're facing. So very exciting. Rick, it looks like the screen has changed again for me anyway. Very exciting to have this group of people here today. Not just, they're not just all fantastic social entrepreneurs in their own right, and with the businesses that they run, all CEOs of the organizations that they run. But in those organizations or through their partnerships, they're also working to support lots of other social entrepreneurs as well. So not only do they have the direct experience of social entrepreneurship, but they know what it takes, or they're learning a lot about what it takes to enable others to become successful social entrepreneurs. So we're going to go into hearing from them in a minute. They'll get up to 12 minutes each. I won't give people a 1-minute warning, but if they do start to run over significantly, then I will interrupt and remind them. And then after those 5 talks, we'll then move into a dialogue around the question of how can we maximize the positive impact of social entrepreneurship to help us all through this transition. The order that we'll do it in is we have Sofia Breitholtz go first, CEO of Reach for Change, talking about a decade of social entrepreneurship and what we've learned. So a nice kind of framing to start us off. And then Maher Ezzeddine, who's the CEO of Ideanco, a big global organization supporting lots of people to come up with new ideas for challenges that we're facing. And then Savera Weerasinghe, who's based in Sri Lanka, who's been doing incredible work around social entrepreneurship, dealing with the waste challenges that we're facing. And then Claudia Valladares, who's the founder and the CEO of the Impact Hub in Caracas, and Tatiana, the Impact Hub in Amsterdam, but has also been at the forefront of the whole Impact Hub movement that I believe is now in over 60 different countries. So great to have you all here. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your experience and inspiration. So let's kick us off with Sofia. Sofia, as I say, CEO of Reach for Change, a global organization particularly focused on children, inspiring women and empathic leadership, as she describes it, but particularly focused on the innovation side of creating a better world for youth and children. So I'm particularly looking forward, Sofia, as you said, to hearing about your overview of a decade of social entrepreneurship and what has it brought us, where we are now, what have you learned from it, what have you learned from looking into it that we can all learn from and take forward into the future. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter and Jim, for having me. And it's nice to see so many on the call today for this really important discussion. As you were talking about, we have been spending the past decade working on supporting social entrepreneurs across 3 different continents. But I think that today we're in a position more than ever where we really need to question the status quo, and where we really need to question whether the systems that we have working around us, whether they really are working for us, whether they are creating equitable green societies, whether they are creating the kind of society that we want to have or not. And it was a great introduction both you, Peter, and Jim gave to really why social entrepreneurship can be such a powerful catalyst, especially coming from this pandemic and this crisis, not only in the fact that they are innovative and agile, but really that they are addressing with business and results-oriented solutions the key kind of challenges that we're facing today. So I'm really excited to be here today, and I think I'll try to share my screen, so hopefully this will work here. So hopefully you can all see.
Yep, that's working.
Yep, perfect, great. So as I said, we've been doing this for the past decade. Reach for Change is an organization that was founded in Sweden, and that's where I'm based, in Stockholm. But really, we have been supporting social entrepreneurs across 3 different continents. So our solutions are local, but a lot of our learnings can be transposed into kind of a global context. My name is Sofia Breitholtz, and I'm really happy to interact with you during this call, but also afterwards. So very happy to have any thoughts or questions or reflections. Always reach out to us. Why do we do what we do? Reach for Change is an organization that is really committed to unleashing the power of social entrepreneurship to create a better world, and especially for children and young people. That's our main kind of target group, and why we get out of bed in the morning. This looks a little bit like more like a science lab, but in effect, that's what we do. We find very early stage social innovators who have maybe not yet proof of concept, but they have a passion, they have an idea, they have an understanding of the kind of social challenges that we have today, and they have the embryo of a kind of a solution. And we take them into our program and we build their capacity, their support. We extend our networks to them. And basically what we want to get to in the final end of this kind of long program that we support our entrepreneurs on is the holy grail of what we're talking about, which is kind of a systems change, which is challenging the way we're doing things today and improving them so that we can have a better social return of outcome, basically. We started 10 years ago, as Peter said, in Stockholm, but we grew quite quickly. We've actually supported social entrepreneurs in 18 different markets. I would characterize ourselves as a social enterprise as well, with our kind of accelerator and incubator programs. And to date, we have supported over 1,000 social entrepreneurs. So we have quite a lot of learnings on what works, what is a big, what we can learn from the different failures that we ourselves also have had. And we also, which we're very proud of, have actually, through building and empowering these social entrepreneurs, we've supported over 4 million children today, and 4 million children and young people today. So during this past decade, what have we learned that we can really transpose into especially the current situation that we're living right now? I mean, we're in an area where we have to accelerate our learnings, and we have to kind of accelerate our solutions as well when we're under extreme pressure, not only societal pressure from the pandemic, but also, as Jim was saying, immense pressures from climate change and other kind of areas. So what kind of lessons have we learned that we can transpose into the situation that we have today? Firstly, I would say for us, a key learning has been how to source these social entrepreneurs very early on. And I think one of the key learnings that we have had is that we need to have kind of patient capital, patient partnerships, to be able to take higher risks. We were talking a little bit before in the introduction about governments and moving slowly and bureaucracies and things like that. Entrepreneurs are not encumbered by that. They can move much quicker, but that means that we as a support network for these social entrepreneurs also have to be willing to take higher risks. We have to look where others don't to find this potential, whether it be in an individual or in an organization. And as an organization, we also have learned very strongly that we really need to build the pipeline of other social entrepreneurs, because the element of having strong role models is extremely important. And finally, what we've also learned is that, we can't do it alone. We're in a complex system. The social entrepreneurs have to develop their products. They have to develop the markets for those products. They have to be able to refine those markets and work within those markets. So at the same time, we have to stimulate the whole kind of ecosystem around the social entrepreneur. So what we've done the past actually 10 years is work very closely with these social entrepreneurs and actually have quite a large pipeline where we look at different potential solutions. And then once they come into our incubator accelerator programs, we work with them very long term to be able to build lasting change. So an example of this is where we actually look for potential where others maybe have dismissed it, is one of our entrepreneurs in Sweden who works with EQ-based kind of educational tools. She was turned away from a number of different other investors because of many different obstacles, but we were able to look where others weren't looking. And I think that that's a very important lesson, to be able to move quickly and take a quick risk. We also learned very concretely that we need to support, it's the local innovations that we need to support. It's those who are living very close to the problems that actually have the solutions to these problems and create the most effective solutions. We also have seen that we really have to include the target group in the design process of these innovations. When we're designing products and services, we don't want to design them for a target group. We want to design them with the target group, because this is going to not only increase the efficiency, but also the sustainability of the solution. As an example for that, we have a great entrepreneur we're supporting in Sweden who works on getting unaccompanied minors into employment opportunities. They don't do anything without having the unaccompanied minor along the design process. So they are the ones actually forming the programs that can get them into employment. Final middle kind of piece of learning is the importance of measuring our impact and really measuring the efficacy of what we're doing. And this is something that you can have a whole new session on, discussing basically impact measurement, because that's a huge topic. But what we have seen is that it's really important as a tool to be able to steer and to understand, are you actually, is your solution effective or not? And we've also been able to understand that it's really important to have kind of wider communication on this topic, to be able to design a kind of a collective impact, and to talk about, what are we doing collectively, and aggregating these targets. And the SDG framework is actually something that's been very useful for us as well to use. This is our development tracker, also worth a whole exciting separate session, but you're welcome to reach out to me if you have questions on that afterwards. We've also really critically learned the efficiency and the importance of actually partnering across different sectors. I think the beauty of social entrepreneurship is it doesn't have to stay in its niche. You can develop services that the public sector purchases, or for other private sector, can then be scaled into other larger organizations. And I think it's really important that we learn to kind of agree on a common language when we're talking about social entrepreneurship, and that we can also agree on a common outcome and a common impact that we have together. And when we can actually measure that impact and communicate it, we found that the partnerships become much more successful. Finally, we've also really understood the importance of keeping a long-term commitment in this. Social change does not happen overnight. We're talking 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And so we have to have really committed partners who are ready for that pathway to scale. And a fantastic example is one of our entrepreneurs in our network called Faraja, who works with Schule Direct. And that's actually the importance of using partnership to be able to scale your innovation. She has an education tool that where rural children in Tanzania can access not even on smartphones, but through telecom and mobile phones. And she was actually able to scale her solutions through a partnership with a telecom operator who could increase their loyalty with their customers at the same time that they were doing a social good. And she was able to introduce this kind of technology and educational solution to people who didn't have access before. Finally, systems change is also a huge, immense topic. But some of the key learnings that we've learned here is that patience is key. We really have to be always asking ourselves the critical questions also. Are we really, are we addressing the root causes of this problem, or are we only, treating the symptom, putting a Band-Aid on? And for that to be able to happen, I just want to give one brief example here of one of our fantastic entrepreneurs in Ghana called Hayford. He was building up an innovation where he was accessing allowing young people to access books through a kind of mobile library. Once this innovation was able to scale to a number of communities in Ghana, he was actually asked by the government in Ghana to join the government and to work on establishing the public library in Ghana. So just to say that systems change, there can be many paths to really shake up and challenge systems. It doesn't have to be that you take your own innovation to scale, but it can actually be that you take your learnings and transpose them into a larger system to actually question them. Just to end very, very quickly, that we have a very ambitious impact goal. We want to 10x our impact in the coming 10 years by 2030. And to be able to do that, we know that we're going to have to work with other actors. So we're really excited to hear also from many of you on today's panel for how we can actually achieve this goal together. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sofia. Dead on the time as well. Much appreciated. Cool. Yeah, and a couple of things I definitely want to come back to. There's your statement that those who are closest to the problems are the ones best placed to create the solutions. Feels really important and also really challenging. And then this question of impact measurement, and are we really getting to the root causes, and how can we actually know that? I think is a great couple of things anyway that I noted to come back to later. So thanks for that, great work. So next, Maher Ezzeddine, CEO of Ideanco. I got offices all over the world now, 40 different cities. He describes it himself as a disruptive idea innovator, getting to over 48,000 people and partners across the world, with a focus on some key areas, but also particularly climate change, which of course is a big area of interest for all of us as well. So Maher, very much looking forward to hearing your experiences around social entrepreneurship and the impact you feel it can make, and what lessons you've learned during your time of doing this that we could take forward.
Right. Well, thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me on board. Also, special thanks to Jim. Thank you both for having me on board, and I'd like to also thank the distinguished panelists for being with us today. First of all, really, I was astonished to hear about Humanity Rising. I think, Peter, we started our discussion roughly about 3 months back, or longer than that, I think. I think at the early stages of the pandemic. So this is when I used to have hair before I shaved my head, hence the result of the pandemic. So yeah, I mean, truly, Humanity Rising is something that all of us need. And to share with you my story, basically our company started in 1999 in Calgary, Canada. I lived half of my life in North America. And it started because I personally had a problem. And that particular problem is that I couldn't retain an actual job. And my job, at that time, I graduated from architecture school. I went into an architecture firm and I worked there. And for some reason, it wasn't really up to my expectations. And everything was profit driven. It's just the design just fell apart, and I just couldn't see myself being part of that particular game. So this is when myself and 2 other colleagues, we decided to start something fresh, something new, something that truly, hopefully, one day it will change the world. And we are working. We've been working towards that since 1999. So that particular idea became a business model, and that business model is crowdsourcing. We are to be fair to others, I always say that, Peter, to you, I think you've heard this in the past, to be fair to the pioneers of crowdsourcing, we are one of the pioneers of crowdsourcing out there in the world. We started in Calgary, and we started out of desperation. We didn't have enough funding to create our company, but we had the opportunity gap being closed. So there are two opportunity gaps in the world. Two gaps in the world. There are, and they are opportunity gap and performance gaps. So the opportunity gap, to be honest with you, we were getting projects left and right. on our plate, except that we didn't have the resources to exploit those projects at the time. So what happened is that we turned into the white paper, yellow pages, and also the internet to outsource the capabilities of others to work with us. Hence the formation of crowdsourcing. This is how it started in 1999. So we started with a unique business model. And with that business model, we had services. One of them was at early stages, the branding strategy. And from branding, we managed to evolve to become a strategy arm. So today we have an advisory arm, which is similar to the McKinsey's or the PwC's of the world out there. This is a strategy arm that we cater our services in different verticals. And those verticals are basically aerospace, climate change, food security, a little bit of cyber, healthcare, biomedical, and other verticals as well. So we started with this particular service until 6 years ago or 7 years ago, we came across to learn that we do need another service in place. But before I get into that particular service, I'd like to mention something that's very important, which is sustainability. So from day one, literally from day one, we truly realized that there's a need for us to integrate sustainability within our pillars, within the core business of our company. So that sustainability was integrated from day one. And so what do I mean by sustainability? Basically, internally within our ecosystem, we had a sustainability arm to take care of our resources, to make sure that we position our people. People are always first, and also to create the jobs of the future and to create opportunities, not only for our people, but for the people around us and within our community. So truly our goal, our vision as a company is to create the opportunities out there to have, to retain a prosperous and free community of people that can connect with each other, network with each other, but still at the same time to be adventurous, hence creativity, hence innovation. So that was our vision. It's still our vision till today's date, and we build on that. So sustainability was part of our arm internally, but also we managed to take that sustainability arm and produce beautiful projects for our customers that became profitable over time. So 7 years ago, I was in Dubai, and to be honest, I'm being in Dubai now, although I live in the UAE, but I travel a lot all across the globe. I haven't been traveling for 6 months because of the pandemic. And what we learned 7 years ago, that there's a need for us to serve the startup ecosystem, and hence the formation of the innovation lab. But that innovation lab came after we tested the water with several projects. We had the business model of the innovation lab to be a service, except we didn't expose it out there. So we started testing the water with different projects. And one of the unique projects that I'd like to particularly touch on today is the project that we integrated with universities and the private sector and the public sector to create the jobs of the future, or future jobs, the sustainable future jobs, again, creating opportunities. So considering we've been in aerospace for the last 17 years, we decided to go ahead and explore the red planet, which is Mars. And we wanted to build shelters on the red planet, except the fact that building shelters on the red planet is a very, very expensive process. So what we've done, we went to the academic institution and we did partnership with them. And this partnership, basically, we created a brand new course. And this course was initiated by us in partnership with the Harvard Aerospace Alumni Organization and other universities, to engage the students into creating a beautiful design for the red planet, creating a shelter. Now, one thing that the students didn't know is the fact that they are creating a product, and that product could become the stepping stone to become a startup. And that startup can create the jobs of the future. But also we want to make sure that it's well integrated with the community, with the people, and integrated with the business world from a profit perspective. So what happened is that the students start working on the objective that they have to meet, their credits inside the university, and they have to pass the course. So therefore they created a beautiful design of shelters based on our requirement. Those shelters, they have to be self-optimized, self-efficient. They need to produce energy, hence climate change integration within that on their own. They need to produce basically heat, AC, and also we looked into the culture, building a culture where on the red planet, where you'd never know what happens when people go and live on. Whenever you have a group of people of 6 or 8 people living either on the lunar surface or the red planet, that God knows, maybe one of them will snap and say, you know what, I am God now, I'm going to conquer the whole planet. So we're trying to create an atmosphere which is an Earth-likely atmosphere to still feel like at Earth. What happened, the end result, is the fact that they created something so beautiful, something so impressive. So we took their work to the likes of NASA. In fact, I took the initiative myself and I went to NASA JPL in Pasadena, California. And we proposed this to the associate director of NASA, and he saw the work of the students and he was shocked. So, and then he said, you know what, the chances of this seeing the light of day out there is quite low. Not because they have bad work, no, because they had great work. The thing is, it's gonna cost lots of money to take it to the right planet. So he said, what's your ultimate goal? I said, you know what, we are exploring space right now to create something, a product that can be utilized on planet Earth. So we want to create a utilitarian product that can be truly utilized on planet Earth and feed the purpose of humanity on planet Earth. And he said, how are you going to do that? I said, you know what, this product right now that you see on your hand, which is, we had scale 1-to-1, but we didn't ship it to Pasadena. We had images. I said, this product, we already discussed few opportunities, few partnerships with the likes of Sheraton, JW Marriott, the Four Seasons hotels, etc. And we told them, listen, your guests, whenever they enter the hotel, they want to go ahead and explore, whether it's a desert or the Rocky Mountains or a particular area in the middle of nowhere. They want to be explorer. And for them to explore this let's say the desert, for instance, or the mountains, maybe they want to explore it in style. So why don't we offer them this shelter as a mobile chalet for them to go ahead and explore the desert? So that can become a product within your portfolio. They can take it, it's self-efficient, self-sustainable, it can produce heat, it's integrated with climate change, with SDGs. They absolutely loved it. They truly loved it. And they thought that this is a starting point of a service that they can provide within their ecosystem. So what happened is that we went back to the students and we told them, listen, you've designed something that's so astonishing, that was truly liked by NASA, and at the same time truly liked by the private sector. So this is a starting point for you to start something from scratch as a startup that can cater towards building a big company and creating the jobs of the future. So this is something that we're very, very proud of. We keep continuing doing the building shelters on the red planet, and that's something that will truly remain to be part of our portfolio within the lab. Something else for you to know, that 4 days ago, we did the official launch of the academy. So we started our own academy 18 months ago, 20 months back. And this academy, I know Jim, he mentioned something about resiliency. To be honest with you, we focus a lot on resiliency. So we want to build resiliency in knowledge. And our core focus on the academy is also crowdsourcing based. With that comes the theme of the academy, which is a challenge-based curriculum. It's all based on challenges. And 4 days ago, we kickstarted the academy, the online academy. And with that, we launched also something that can be utilized with grade 9 to grade 12 high schoolers to integrate STEAM education with the business world and social entrepreneurship. Our ultimate goal, to conclude, and I'm sorry I don't have any slides here, I just want to tell you the story in a nutshell. Hopefully I can contribute later on, and I want to leave room for the panelists also to tell their story. Our ultimate goal, Peter, is truly to create opportunities so people can remain to be free, adventurous, and prosperous. Truly, this is our goal. And we've been working towards that goal since 1999.
Great, thanks, Maher. Great story and very inspiring example of how research into something that seems so far away, like putting a habitation Mars can lead to creating something that can be used, in other parts of the planet. So very cool, very inspiring. And I'm sure we'll come back. There's been I've got a few reactions in the chat, so I'm sure we'll come back to some of these during the dialogue. So Savera Weerasinghe is up next, the founder and CEO of Ananta Sustainables, focused on sustainable packaging, but also set up a bigger network of sustainable businesses focused on waste. So it's really been hands-on in terms of trying to solve a really major problem using social entrepreneurship as the way to get to it. So very much looking forward to hearing your story, Savera, and what you've learned from it as well, for others to take forward as we
Sure.
attempt to transition through this period. So over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to you and Jim for having me. I'm incredibly honored to be a part of this panel, but also Humanity Rising's kind of months of bringing amazing people together. I definitely don't have as much experience as the past two panelists. I'm kind of mind blown by Maher's work as well as Sofia's. But we, as a small kind of social enterprise, are asking a lot of questions. So maybe I'll run you through what we're doing with Ananta Sustainables and Waste Action LK, which is the larger network that you spoke of. And then maybe some of the questions that we are asking ourselves as a social enterprise in this kind of very uncertain times. So let me just share my screen. Yep. So Ananta, I mean, the idea was to provide packaging that would kind of go back into the ground and have an infinite loop, kind of cradle to cradle. So Ananta in itself means infinity. So in Sri Lanka, we have a huge waste management crisis in that there's a lot of lacking infrastructure. So what we wanted to do is see, what were the solutions, how can we find and bring solutions to the waste management crisis, and which is how we ended up on compostable packaging. About 60% of our waste in Sri Lanka is compostable, and we have a great environment for composting because we're a tropical island. So we wanted to get into compostable packaging and see, okay, what can we do? But we also realized that there's a lot of education and awareness that was lacking in Sri Lanka in terms of what plastic was, what was happening with single-use plastic, and waste generation. So one huge part of what we were trying to do is, learn and have communities talk about what waste was, but also trying to start conversations that were not, this general narrative of plastic is bad, stop using it, because that didn't seem to be going anywhere. So we were, trying to do installations and work with different fishing communities, and I decided early on, because I just didn't want to do traditional marketing or advertising on a product, because we were also trying to look for solutions. So instead of doing any marketing or advertising, we thought, okay, what if we do some community events and see what is really needed? And that's how we kind of ended up on this compostable packaging. How do we make it more accessible to more people? We realized that it was less apathy and more just access that was the issue. A lot of people didn't have access to this packaging, so how could we make it as accessible island-wide as possible if they could order it online and get it to their door with no minimum order quantity. So a household or a business, whatever size, could get compostable packaging. In doing this, we realized more and more that the understanding of why this was really important was lacking. And so therefore that it came to head in terms of, where can we go with this? And that's kind of when I partnered with a investigative journalist, media maverick, I would say. And so we decided, okay, we have the waste and community action part of it, and you have the awareness. How do we bring this together to work? So that's when we put together Waste Action LK, which was trying to be a coalition and network. So our goal was to see, okay, how can we bring communities and connect different players to address some of the gaps within sustainable waste management, because everyone seemed to be working in silos. And as a social entrepreneur, you feel like, there's so many days where you're like, why am I doing this? But also, it feels like you're working completely by yourself and there's no one else. So I was also addressing my own need in putting this network together, is how can we connect these people and connect them in these supply chains, as opposed to them having to figure out their own supply chains a lot of the time. So in bringing Waste Action LK together, we've done different things from, say, a home composting kit that brings in together 4 partners from the network, one to sell it online, one to, also reforest, an app to collect extra recycling instead of, and then one to provide the bin and the composting. So those are just examples of what Waste Action LK does. Currently, we're working on a broader documentary on waste and sustainability in Sri Lanka. We're a small island, very patriotic, little bit misguided in where that patriotism exists or should reside. So trying to speak to this kind of ancient sustainability past that we had, and also where plastic has played a role in it. The reason I bring all of this up is because as a social enterprise and as a coalition for social enterprises and institutions, I guess the questions we have been asking is, how do we exist in these kind of uncertain times? And I think what we've seen, especially during COVID, is that the bigger you are, the less adaptable you can be. So a more traditional business or entity is as it gains momentum and as it gains more size, this kind of narrative of expand, accelerate, grow, our definitions of success have caused a lot of businesses to kind of amass this momentum and like this kind of cartoon image of a kind of ball rolling down a hill and then also collecting all the people in its wake as it rolls down this hill, is this image that we wanted to move away from, because it didn't allow businesses to be, or any of these organizations that we were working with, to be adaptive. So the questions that we're asking ourselves right now is, how can a business itself act more like a natural organism, in that how can it be more compostable? Can we have this conversation of, of a strategic funeral for the business? Does it have to, or for the enterprise, does it have to last forever? Or can it, break down to these natural compounds of who are the communities it serves, and what is the impact that it wants to have? And keep breaking down into those three, into those kind of compounds, so it can better meet the need of the hour and bring in the right partners and the right collaborators. And so our idea is, okay, if we were to stop existing tomorrow, what would that look like? What would this funeral, what would this handover look like? If a tree were to die in a forest, it would pass on its nutrients to other trees. How do we pick those other trees? How do we distribute our resources? Who do we want to be working with? So these are the kind of questions of resilience and adaptability that we're asking ourselves in saying, okay, every time we meet this uncertainty, how can we adapt better? How can we go back to these core questions so we don't have this dissonance between why we started and where we're trying to expand and go to? Because a lot of the time this dissonance is where I feel like it loses its core identity and the core of why this enterprise was started. So for Waste Action LK, I think our learnings are trying to understand, when especially in these times, how can we go back to who is our community? Which community do we want to serve? Who do we want to harness? So right now we realize that it's going back to the basics of understanding. And in Sri Lanka, for example, religious institutions play a role. So why would a waste management entity be talking to a Buddhist monk? But because it's intrinsically plays a huge part in human behavior and management. So if we can go back to these kind of compostable natural compounds, we are able to ask ourselves much more difficult questions and able to adapt, especially in these uncertain times, because we don't really know where we're going. We can't make projections into the future. So it's how do we serve the need of the hour with the best partners possible? Do we have to compete? Can we take a step back and push other people forward or other entities forward? Because if our goal was to reduce waste, and there are other, as Ananta Sustainables as a packaging company, if there are other people in the market now, do we have to compete with them? Can we take a step back and serve a different purpose so that they can sell the products? So those are some of the questions that we're asking. Strategic funerals is where we are kind of at, and how can we compost better as a company, as an entity? So that's, I'll leave you guys with that. I'm really excited to hear from the other panelists as well, some of the answers of how they would answer those questions. Thank you.
Great. Savera, thanks so much. What a great perspective from having been an organization that's working with waste and how to transform it, to turning that back on yourselves and saying, what does it mean to be an organization that acts more aligned with the natural processes, and if it's not functioning, how does it break down? And how can it, what a powerful way to think about it, rather than having to be competitive with everybody else, right? To think, what would it mean to actually follow a process that's much more aligned with the way an ecosystem might work, for example, and how could we, and if we were to compost ourselves, how could our nutrients support others? Really beautifully, or kind of selfless way of thinking about business. Yeah.
Thank you. Our goal is to act more like mycelium in the soil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not there yet for sure, but thank you.
Yeah, really great questions and perspective. One of the things I've often said when talking about being in these non-linear transitions is that one of the core functions to be played is to help old systems to let go gracefully, so that they can actually fertilize the soil for the new systems rather than toxify it. And if we're in this kind of very polarized, aggressive approach towards the old system, then they're just going to resist letting go. So is there a way we can help them get acknowledgement for what they've contributed so far, which enables them to relax in a way and let go and be able to compost themselves, as you say, to fertilize the soil for the future? So yeah, beautiful perspective. And hospicing old systems is the way I've thought about it before. So composting is even better, because you actually got that image of reusing the good stuff that they developed, to take things into the future. So very cool.
Which tree is going to grow next? That's the
yeah, great, thank you. So next, Claudia Valladares, who set up the Impact Hub in Caracas, and was also part of the early stages of the whole Impact Hub movement, as well as being involved at a global level. So really committed to supporting social entrepreneurs. She says if you were to ask her what the impact is that she would most like to create in the world, she'd answer without hesitation, defeating poverty. So I'm really looking forward to hearing, Claudia, your experience over the years of working with social entrepreneurs. And after these many years of experimentation, what have you learned, and where are you right now in terms of what you'd suggest to the community of social entrepreneurship globally in terms of really increasing our impact? So over to you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Jim, and also Tatiana for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and also sharing with the rest of the panelists. As you were saying, we founded the Impact Hub here in Caracas back in 2014. Actually, our sister hub at the time was Impact Hub Amsterdam. So I'm very close to Tatiana and very thankful forever, because they were the ones who helped us through the process and help us to make it happen here in a very complex context back then, and that probably remains even worse nowadays. So Impact Hub, for the ones who doesn't know, it's a community of entrepreneurs. We build communities of entrepreneurs to create impact in our society, to tackle the most pressing challenges in our society and make it happen through our communities of entrepreneurs and with direct impact also. So in general, as you all know, social entrepreneurs, from my point of view, are in this world to identify and tackle all the problems that hasn't been solved by the market or the governments, and somebody needs to, you know, to make it finish or change or whatever the situation is demanding us. And especially we refer to all these problems that causes exclusion, marginalization, suffering, or especially for segments of the humanity that hasn't the access, has lack of access or lack of opportunities. So that's what we do. That's what we do every day. But on the other side, I was thinking that nobody said before to us or advised us that we need to operate in VUCA times, right? Nobody said that on top of dealing with all these problems, we needed to solve it within contexts that are volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and now that's what we're living, especially in this pandemic world and looking towards a post-pandemic world. So here in Venezuela, in our particular case, I just wanted to remark that this pandemic is just another problem. We have a bunch of problems. Right now, 23% of the households don't have access to water. 75% of the population, even if they do have access to water, do not receive water daily at home. 4 million of our children are out of the school system right now as we speak. 30% suffer from chronic malnutrition. 96.5% of our population right now is poor, living at 0.7 US dollars a day. So I always said, what type of poverty could be that? You know, not even $1. So imagine the suffering, the lack of access, the lack of opportunities that the majority of the population is living. So what to do in front of all this? And I was thinking how to make it, you know, like simple and I just I used the name of COVID to reframe it and to use it as an acronym for other things, more positive things. As we, as social entrepreneurs, I think we are obliged to work on. The C, for me, reminds us on connection, collaboration, and community. And I say it very precisely because against the isolation or the social distancing or the confinement or the lockdown that is proposed in this pandemic, we more than ever need examples of extreme and radical collaboration, as Jim was mentioning at the beginning, a deeper sense of connection and a more cohesive community from social entrepreneurs building a better society. And I just wanted to put some examples of what we have done, especially in this pandemic, to try to make it happen, because it's easy to say, but you know, how you do communities or more closer collaboration or connection with the rest of the world in these particular times. And we have organized from hackathons, for example, as our brothers and sisters from Impact Hub Zurich or Impact Hub Berlin did, where 42,000 participants took place in providing solutions on how to tackle the problems and the consequences that this pandemic is causing. We also did it in Latin America, not only among Impact Hubs, but with 6 other organizations, Disruptivo TV, Social Lab, Yunus in Youth, and many others. And we convened more than 3,600 participants, and we produced more than 200 ideas of how to solve the problems within our region. But as we as Impact Hub didn't want to just have a pile of ideas in a database. So we said, why don't we incubate these ideas? So we got together, and 7 Impact Hubs from the region, we organized what we call Impacto 2020, which was an incubation program for these ideas. And nowadays we are running some of these entrepreneurships that came out of this pandemic world, with many beautiful examples. And nowadays, since that happened, we are doing another partnership in Venezuela with UNICEF to tackle solutions that are already in place from entrepreneurs, from social entrepreneurs, that can be scaled to other very rural areas, especially where children or teenagers and their families are suffering from so many problems, not only from the pandemic, but for all the problems that I mentioned before. And like that, we are also working with many other organizations within Latin America to start a platform of education for social entrepreneurs and innovators that is going to be launched very soon. And like that, many other collaboration programs with the sector, private sector, and with many other stakeholders in our entrepreneurship ecosystem to try to make it happen. Then we come with the O of COVID. So O for opportunity to learn how to be anti-fragile is the title that I wanted to use, because we usually talk a lot about resilience. And I think these times not only demand us to be resilient, but it's asking us to be anti-fragile. And I know that this is a term that was raised by Nassim Taleb in his book. And I really like it because he said very, very cleverly, anti-fragility is beyond resilience and robustness. The resilient resists shocks and stays the same, but the anti-fragile gets better. And that's what I like, because it's not as it's nice to be a bamboo that follows and goes back, or a palm tree that blows with the wind and come back to original position. But this is like what happened when you get cut, for example. Can you raise again, and can you raise better than before? As when we cut a plant that is infected, for example, with an illness. So I guess just wanted to put a little example of what anti-fragility is for me in this context. We have a program that is called Technovation Girls. We work with teenagers from 14 to 18 years old, especially that doesn't have access to technology and are out of the system, and usually doesn't have access to STEM. And in this particular year, Technovation program was in the middle when the COVID started. So we couldn't continue convening the girls in our Impact Hub that usually serves as a laboratory of technology for them, because they don't have even access to internet, or they don't have computers at home. So we said, what are we going to do? Because this is a global contest, and we didn't want these girls to get out of the system. So we said, well, why if we don't, how about, you know, paying for the data in their phones so they at least can have some access to the technology. And of course, with more following up from the professors, the moderators, the teachers, and also the mentors. And to make the long story short, at the end, out of 23 teams that were participating, 21 were able to finish their apps, to upload it to the page, to upload their codes, all the programming, to finish their business plans and the videos. And 4 of the teams were passed through semifinals. And this is, for me, anti-fragility, how you raise even better than before. Then we come with the V of vision of what is important. And I think this is a call on the back to basics. I'm personally very concerned of what COVID is changing, how COVID is changing our lives, because this new normal is proposing a lot of things that we were not accustomed to. And I keep challenging this concept, because I really ask myself, what is this redefinition of normal? What is this new normal really? Because I guess this confinement has blurry the walls between our privacy, our rituals, our space, has erased the time as we knew it before. And I guess we need, in this hybrid world that I guess is going to come to a balance between the digital and the personal, and the presence of the human beings, I guess is going to come back to ask very basic questions to ourselves on what is basic, what are the rituals that we need to recover, that we have lost in these times.
Claudia,
Finally,
we're over time, yeah. So if when you're ready to wrap up.
Yes, I'm measuring my time here. I was about to wrap up.
I am the D.
From innovation to create a more just and sustainable world, and I have many examples on how to do it. And I guess all the panelists are examples of how to use innovation. D, from diversity and inclusion, how to take into consideration the extremes differences that COVID has put into our faces more than ever, and what to do about it. And I guess the most important thing is that at the end, I think this pandemic and the post-pandemic world is telling us that we need more of this humanity rising, and take into account that maybe we cannot stop the waves or control the wind, but we can learn how to kite surf. And I would like to continue talking about this, and happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Great. Nice image to have left us with. Thanks very much. And say never waste a good crisis. Having taken COVID and turned the letters into meaning something else, that's transforms the energy of the whole thing. Very cool. Thanks. And last but certainly not least, Tatiana Glad, who I've known for many years, and who co-founded the Impact Hub in Amsterdam, current CEO there, and has really been committed to sustainability for certainly as long as I know anyway. Not just cognitively, but really with her whole being, and also somebody who thinks deeply about what are we doing really, and are we doing everything we can to make the greatest positive impact? Also with a really clear awareness of how the quality of the individual change maker impacts the kind of change that they're trying to make in the world, and the importance of that. So Tatiana, really looking forward to hearing from you, given all your experience and commitment around how can we be the bridge to the future that we want.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me today. Yeah, maybe just a short intro to understand my context here in Impact Hub Amsterdam. So a similar ethic is what Claudia pointed out, but our context is obviously quite different. Our mission here is to impact societal issues through entrepreneurial action. And we do that with a community base here of about 400 member entrepreneurs, but we also work with the partners around them, kind of the larger ecosystem, to help them transition their enterprises or their efforts, maybe they're in the public sector, towards impact, sometimes through scouting solutions or brokering alliances between them and social entrepreneurs, but also co-creating acceleration programs or learning programs to advance specific issue areas. For the key issues we've been focusing on for the past couple of years have been circularity. So entrepreneurs like Savera who are closing the loop on waste, plastics, food, and inclusion. Now, we also teach capacities, I think, as Peter alludes to. We're very interested in, those inner capacities that really help to support people to live their social entrepreneurial venturing in the world. So, you might not have a social enterprise, but I think there's many people who might be entrepreneurs or exist in other parts of society or other types of institutions that, have this drive as well. And we believe you need certain capacities to help liberate that and engage others. And that's through the art of hosting practice, which I know some of you have touched on in this collective, and transition theory. We work with Drift, the Dutch Research Institute for Societal Transitions, on that. And we look at how to apply this on building our own ecosystem of diverse stakeholders and also around each of these key issue areas. So I'll draw a couple of examples from that. But when I was invited to this and was writing my blog, I think, this was, about 2 months ago, we were really, I guess, troubled with being hit, kind of also, as many of you said, being hit by this pandemic and seeing that, these massive bailouts for justifiable companies like airlines and such like that, and seeing our sector really, to be quite honest, quite ignored. It was very, very difficult for any of these entrepreneurs to get support, to be heard, to be seen. Social entrepreneurs don't seem to fall in any particular box. And by definition, being entrepreneurs, you don't want to fall in any box. So, it was very, very difficult for a lot of this sector to figure its place. And yet at the same time had this conviction that they're not only needed right now to respond to some of the immediate issues, but also really needed in the future for all these bigger issues they've been working on. So the questions I was sitting with as I kind of, was uploading, what Humanity Rising meant to me and coming into this conversation and joining quite a few of the other sessions was, how does entrepreneurship contribute to systems change? And also, how can entrepreneurs help build the bridge, through these challenges that COVID has presented us with, but really for that healthier future that needs to be different than the one we came from. And I think you've also heard how Claudia's mentioned that we really believe in our network that impact can't happen in isolation. It requires collective action. So most of our examples and most of what I'm living is it's beyond the hero entrepreneur, the one person who kind of solves things. I think we really have to move beyond that on our planet right now and really look at how entrepreneurs are also working with other people and how a lot of ideas are coming out of collectives, even if a few people move them. But I'm going to, in this sort of little talk, I'll just give 3 examples. I want to touch on how these entrepreneurs are actually helping to realize the SDGs, because I see the SDGs really as a, it's the biggest agreement we've had on the planet for a long time, where there's a framework to move forward. And we've seen many of the entrepreneurs kind of align with this or can be kind of tagged to the SDGs. I want to share a little bit how the efforts of entrepreneurs aggregate towards systems change on specific topics, and also how they've been responding to COVID and what we're learning from that. So the first piece about the SDGs, because I also saw it came up in the question, so I thought it might be good to touch on this, was in our whole global network, we have about 16,000 members. We've aggregated them bottom up to see where they work on. And we've been able to see that the top SDGs that our global community are addressing are SDG number 4, education and lifelong learning. So about a third of our network are all working on initiatives. So as you've heard, some in Venezuela, there's ones all over the world. They all aggregate to making change happen along that SDG. So it's been very interesting for us to see that about a third of our network actually is tackling that topic. And I guess the big question, I saw a question about impact tracking, is, how can we find coherence in tracking this to show that movement over the next 10 years? That's a bit of a challenge, I think. The second most popular SDG is around decent work and sustained economic growth. So I can, as you can imagine, I think by definition, entrepreneurship is trying to create good jobs for people and address the unemployment issue. And the third one is around equity, equality, and social justice. So really trying to shift the playing field in many different sectors. So, and obviously a lot of this works, even though they've put it separately as SDG number 17 through partnerships, what we've seen is a lot of this work through entrepreneurs is happening through partnerships. So one example that we had, which actually tackles two of them, SDG 13 on climate change and SDG number 2 on food, has been a large organic food company based here in the Netherlands that approached us with an interest to stimulate more impact entrepreneurship in the organic food sector. And this is interesting because, you could say that, well, why would they want to stimulate more competition for themselves? But I think, this is where the mindset piece comes into play. Really, that people are zooming out and saying, well, it's not just about increasing impact of our own entity, but it's also about increasing impact on a particular issue. And so what we did was we co-created with them a bespoke accelerator program to help new organic food startups. And we did that a few years ago. We started to see more and more of them. So we've been kind of developing this whole sort of food ecosystem approach around that. But with that, we also engaged a partner bank to really help bring the business case assessment, the due diligence experience, investment leads and such like that. And so this program was a real success, both to bring, more entrepreneurs forward to start to work on the food sector, but also to bring innovation into that food company and into that bank, and therefore advancing the field in a more sort of co-creative way across different partners. Another example, we partner with WWF, the World Wildlife Fund in the Netherlands, to tackle SDG 6, water and environment, and also responsible consumption. And there we wanted to support innovators with upstream solutions with plastic. And not just the plastic waste, but really looking at how do you create alternatives upstream that, what causes the plastic waste in the first place? Because what we've discovered is a lot of the plastic waste is actually, it has an end life. There's at a certain point, like it is just waste. There's not much you can do with it. But interestingly enough, one of our member enterprises invented a new way of recycling PET plastics endlessly. And so what they've been doing is since last November, been coming out with a prototype where they're working with Coca-Cola to try and look at how all these bottles can be replaced and how all the plastic from those bottles can be endlessly recycled into new bottles and new products. So that was kind of a game changer and really, an entrepreneur entering, but with a real systems perspective for change around that. And the last example around this has been around a large fashion brand that hired us actually to run an initiative to scout worldwide through our network for innovators focused on the social change aspect in the textile supply chain. And we generated a database of over 800 solutions from them through our network. And some of those received grants and employee mentorship and also entrepreneurship masterclasses at a leading business school. So the idea there was a very large company that sees, how often we say these large companies are so different from the individual entrepreneurs, but what they did was they also took on the commitment to help these entrepreneurs grow to eventually become, available suppliers, because often when we're looking for solutions at a certain level of scale, the small entrepreneurs are overseen because they're seen as too small, but there's not many folks who actually, really help them build that capacity to be a viable supplier at that level of scale. So that was quite an interesting program in building capacity as well. Now, how we aggregate, the entrepreneurs towards system change, one is, by SDG, how we've seen, but what we've seen particularly here over the last 2 years, we've engaged in an initiative with a local foundation and the Ministry of Agriculture to convene and host a community of stakeholders with the purpose to transition the food system. So what we did here was start first with purpose and go, right, the food system is unsustainable the way it is now. If this crisis really stops supply chains, we would be out of food in the city in 3 days. So how do we transition that food system to be in itself not just more sustainable to feed a city, but really sustainable for all those players, along lines, and ultimately also the farmer and the land that the food comes from. And so we really committed to look at innovation in the food value chain and brought entrepreneurs at the core of that program because they're the ones who are thinking differently. They've been thinking of new solutions, new ways of arranging the chain, new ways of creating value through the chain. But we surrounded them with food companies, with farmers, with the regenerative agriculturists, with public authorities. And so what we found over the past 2 years has been a lot of really interesting innovations, including a policy paper we put out around innovation for shortening the food supply chain. And what happened during COVID, when they were hard hit, particularly with all the catering industry gone, like most of these were about to go out of business. One of the two amazing things we found happen. One was how, because they'd gone through our program together, they really bound together in collaborative ways to find new solutions, so to back each other up on their food logistics, to further, bring in more innovation, to bundle their products in ways, yes, to go, online and delivery, but they really had to pivot quite quickly to stay alive in this way. But furthermore, we're doing another research piece now with them that's going to be published in the next week around, how they've been affected by COVID and what are the opportunities coming out of that, and where we need a little bit more regulatory support, different types of incentives and such. But that was really an interesting study, and seeing how they're all adding up to change, in a particular sector and towards the food transition, and how they're able to learn also from the farmers and the farmers from folks in the city, where there used to be really great divides between these types of stakeholders. Another one of my favorite responses during COVID has been Makers Unite, which is a project that's existed for a few years that really tackled the refugee issue a number of years ago, and has brought refugees in, they're called newcomers here, and brought them in to create an atelier, a workshop where they have applied their skills to making products for other organizations. They started out by making new products out of life vests that were brought in from the islands, and from like Lesbos and other islands in Greece. But what they did was they really quickly pivoted during COVID and started to make masks for healthcare workers. There were not enough masks in this country, and health workers were very much at risk, and they quickly pivoted. And so to me, this is, a lot of our entrepreneurs in textiles are now making masks. That's been something that almost every one of them has done on the side. But what's interesting about this project with Makers Unite, and they worked with a number of NGOs to get these masks out to healthcare workers, was just really being a stunning example of how refugees or newcomers are actually active contributors to society. So shifting our paradigm about what those people mean in society, and how they have, we put a lot of effort actually into contributing to a society that has been sometimes less than welcoming to them. We've also seen a 3D printing enterprise transition their manufacturing to make swabs for corona tests domestically, so we don't have to rely on supplies from elsewhere. We see another enterprise transition their equipment to make touchless hand sanitizer dispensers. So to me, there's been a lot of those, very practical corona responses. But I think, for us, it's also been entering into deeper research around, well, beyond the immediate responses, what does this mean for the future, particularly if maybe 50% of our sector just can't pull through economically? And also, we've had a lot of impact. Investors and financiers just step back. They're looking after their own portfolios. There's a lot of risk around finance. I think they see this as a very, risky sector. A lot of people have just put things on hold for a year. So, what we've dug into is a piece of research actually with our city, and hopefully an article that we'll publish within the next few weeks, where we've seen many of the entrepreneurs actually take more stronger stance for the fact that they've been working on these issues for so long. So all of these issues that Corona has made more visible, whether it's pollution, whether it's poverty, whether it's, digital divide within our own city, whether it's youth going into crime because their parents are more disenfranchised, like right now, many immigrants with stores that have closed down. We're seeing the youth, now trying to find alternate ways to make money because they can't do it through their parents' stores and such, that all these issues have actually grown due to Corona and are going to keep growing unless we have what I would call solutionists, these impact entrepreneurs, respond. So some of the biggest learnings from that.
Just over time a little bit now, if you could wrap up.
I'm on my last piece.
Cool.
So some of the biggest learnings have been about impact investing, and about, like, as I said, people stepping back, the perception of risk, how actually social entrepreneurs are often seen as more financially risky. But if you look at the bigger picture, they help to reduce the social and environmental risks. And also, I think, as Savera hints, this whole mindset. We need the mindset to shift from rooted in traditional economic thinking to really a more living systems perspective. And I think we've been talking about resilience here. So for me, it was great learning from Claudia a bit more about the anti-fragile and look at that. But right now, one of the biggest observations is that as we experience this economic contraction, we become so preoccupied with the contraction that I think we're paying too little attention to what the resulting expansion might be, and then might very well be in a new form. So I think I'll just let us go forward. But I mean, some questions I want to bring into here is, how do we redefine growth? And also, how do we shift all the regulatory incentives to favor enterprise that adds social and environmental value as opposed to the extractive businesses? And my favorite part, the conversation.
Great, thanks, Tatiana. And a nice bridge. That last point you made was something I wanted to actually throw in and to get the conversation going. And it's come up in the chat a couple of times in kind of different forms. Was this tension between the current economic framework within which any entrepreneur is having to operate and trying to get to the root causes of the problems? So really, this question of how are we measuring whether we're getting to the root causes? How possible is it to get to the root causes when you have to play by the rules of the current economic system? And how does that interface? For example, one of the examples that came up was the Coca-Cola thing. So we help Coca-Cola recycle their bottles, but that still enables them to ship, sugar water worldwide. So how do you as kind of social entrepreneurs deal with that creative tension between the economic framework that you're having to operate in, that we know is a big part of the problem that we're facing, with trying to make the impact you're trying to make and getting to the root causes? I'd love to hear about how you kind of reconcile that for yourselves. And just feel free to start, whoever wants to. Maybe we can go to the view where we can see everybody, Rick, if that's possible. Who wants to jump in?
Oh, I can start maybe. Yeah, I think this is an interesting, really interesting discussion. I mean, I'm hopeful because I see more now, especially in the past, couple of years, that there doesn't have to be such a dichotomy between, profit and purpose. And so I see that there's I would say that polarization that we've seen before is decreasing, and now more than ever we see, I think people are starting to grasp the idea also that there's business opportunity also behind, really solving the kind of the key obstacles and challenges we have today. And I think we see it from investors also, who are, although there's a lot of work to be done, with, global frameworks such as ESG frameworks and other things, I think that we're moving more. I mean, I am hopeful that we are moving more in a direction where investors are starting to put very clear requests for returns. And these returns aren't not only financial. They're also, that we're working on the social and environmental, like, positive returns as well. So I see partly the innovation side, so that there's an opportunity to actually solve the challenges we have today, but using business principles, but also this second push from investors, which I see as really, really positive. So I mean, I don't think I'm nearly as pessimistic as I was a couple of years ago. I think that there's been a lot of shift.
Do you think that we could actually solve the kind of current challenges within the existing economic framework without major kind of institutional change of the WTO rules, et cetera?
On the massive, that I'll leave to somebody else, because that's a very large question, whether we need to turn over the whole system completely or work within the confines of it, which I think social entrepreneurs are a perfect example of that, where they're trying to push for systems change, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that we upturn the whole system, I don't think.
Great.
I'd like to go back to Savera, as where the old systems can fertilize the ground for the new systems that will grow.
Yeah, Savera, did you want to come in?
Just to add to that, I've been, I don't know if maybe some people have read this book, but I'm reading a book called New Power, which kind of compares these old models of institutions that, and then compares it to kind of new models of power or harnessing community. So it compares it to, actually, I can share my screen right here and show you. It's by, here, I can show it to you. Sorry. Yep. So that's the book. But it compares kind of radical transparency with discretion and confidentiality. So it takes these new models and old models and shows the success and failure of both, which I've found quite interesting. So just a recommendation that's kind of what has inspired some of the thinking or questions. So definitely recommend it. I haven't finished it, so I don't know, but I definitely recommend it.
Cool. Anyone else on this question, this creative tension between current framework and trying to get to the root causes?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to it. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. One, totally agree with Sofia about the integration between business and purpose to see the confluence of that. So whatever incentivizes that, has to be supported. Now, there, I do think some of the system has to change. The economic, the regulatory system, the incentives, and such. Second thing I think is leadership and understanding how you're aligned, because organizations are only people. Right. So, I mean, you can say it's a bad company, but there could be amazing people in there trying to turn it around. So I think it's really important to really look at leadership and how leadership models it, and also what the intention is there. So most social enterprises, I mean, we've been so small for so many years. I think right now creating these partnerships are not easy. And it's the intention is often the movement and not the product itself. So everybody knows in Holland, the Tony's Chocolonies, and they've been exporting everywhere. Their mission is a whole movement of slave-free chocolate. It's not about selling their product and keeping, their market share. So there's something about that distinction that we have to remember when you're being systems entrepreneurs, that is actually about the bigger impact. So in our network, we have an expression called unlikely allies. And sometimes you need to pair with the unlikely allies, but it's how you broker that, how power works, and Ideanco would not have gotten the chance to really get a factory up and going at that level of scale without a big player who, wastes plastic coming in and actually enabling that to make sure that it can go to market. They're not owned by Coca-Cola. So, there's a difference there in the power dynamics as well that you need to pay attention to.
I just wanted to add, Peter, also that even though, as Savera and Sofia were saying before, it's not probably feasible to tackle the whole system at once, but start brick by brick around what you can control, or at least what you can influence. But also, I guess, is that planting this seed of how new businesses need to evolve, because the new social entrepreneurs have another way to look at the systems, and I guess their hope for society. And if they understand that we all not can become unicorns, but we can be zebras, as we said also, growing, of course, but doing good as we grow, and not harassing everything that we have around, and finishing all the industries, or disrupting everything that nobody else can have an opportunity. We are building another economic systems that is more regenerative. So I guess it's brick by brick.
Thanks. One of the ideas we've been inspired by in Humanity Rising, that's come up as we think about strategies for change, is this idea of parallel polity, which actually came out of Czechoslovakia, where Václav Havel and colleagues in Charter 77 went and decided they were just going to try to build the alternative next to the existing system and just basically proceed until apprehended. So that's what I hear a lot of. We need to kind of build it and do it the other way and keep going, and as best as we can until, as it were, there's a bridge over to that new system. Maher, I'd be interested in your perspective on all of this, because you've been engaged in quite a lot of the high-level systems there as well. How do you see this tension between the kind of needs or demands of the current economic framework and an attempt to try to make a positive difference within it?
Right, Peter. So to be honest with you, what I understand from the conversation so far, that there's this notion of complete system change, which is, personally, I'm completely against it, because this is we want. If you're going to have a complete system change, that's a complete revolution, and with a complete revolution, a lot of things can happen, and revolution in the system, I'm trying to say. So what we need is basically incremental change rather than having revolution change. So with incremental change to the existing system, I think it will close a lot of the gaps. And most of these gaps that we've seen today are to be particular, are opportunity gaps. What I mean by that, the fair spread of opportunities to others. So currently today, the opportunity gap is being closed to particular people or groups or communities, and others are being left off with nothing. Or at one point, they benefit from such opportunities, but at very, very low prices. I truly believe with this pandemic, I think it brought some sort of, it brought the emotions of people back on track. And now people, they realize that us as human beings, we have to care about one another, and we have to truly take care of one another. I don't know how long would this last, but I believe we should build on that, truly build on that. So in order to create this next revolution that we always aspire and dream of, and this revolution that I'm truly dreaming about it does not apply in today's date. So there's no sense for me to talk about it, to be honest. This is just my personal opinion. The reason behind it, because it's so far away. It is far away. So let's deal with what exists in the field today. And the field requires incremental change. And such incremental changes can be applied as soon as possible to close certain gaps. And once those gaps are being closed, I truly believe that the regulatory system, the corporate governance of companies, the fair spread of opportunities are going to be much better than the way it used to be before. This is one thing. And I truly believe that poverty, for instance, in particular areas in the world, can be eradicated dramatically based on such an incremental change, just an incremental change. It can do so much. So this is what I care about the most, to be honest with you.
Great. We're getting a little bit of pushback on that in the chat, Maher, as you might expect, particularly around, do we have the time for incremental change, given the kind of science around climate and the kind of 10 years that the scientists are giving us?
Right. So Peter, if you're talking about climate change requires a complete revolution. We're talking about a vertical. We're not, so when you say a complete system, I'm against the complete system. I'm definitely not with the fact that we should be talking about it. I mean, we can talk about it, but I'm against it, me personally, because I don't see it going in the right direction. But from a climate change perspective, I definitely, I'm with a complete revolution. We have to have a revolution in place because climate change is happening. This is something that I'm a true believer in. And we have to do something about it. So with the pandemic, what happened is that you're going to see in the next few years a lot of electric vehicles taking place, particularly in Europe. You know, you're going to see a lot of countries in Europe being independent from the traditional vehicles and going towards electrical vehicles. The pandemic created a demand. Truly, it did create a demand. And this is going to have a ripple effect in other countries and other economies out there. So to answer your question, Peter, if it's climate change related and if it's vertical related, I'm with you all the way. It's a complete revolution that we need. But if it's something else or a complete ecosystem, then I prefer to stay with the incremental change.
Great, thanks. Well, let's open it back up again. See, as we come towards the end here, if people have got any other responses to that. Some of the comments in the chat are, can we really separate climate change from business or other topics? Isn't it all interconnected? Can we have incremental in one sector and kind of revolution in the other, etc.? But anybody else? What else? Any? Feel free to move it on to something else if you want. But who else would like to jump? Savera, you unmuted yourself.
Just to add to that kind of question in the chat to Maher, I'm just trying to understand. Isn't it some components of the systems that we're in that we're speaking need to change that are exacerbating or creating climate change? So how do you separate the two and put climate change in one vertical when we see that it's these systemic changes, these incremental, these little factors, all the nodes, levers in this system that accumulate and create climate change? So how do we separate the two? How do you have revolution in all the factors that are contributing to climate change, which doesn't result in a complete systems change, or at least if enough levers are changed, that not change the system? So I'm just trying to understand what you mean by that.
Right. So, Peter, you mind if I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, Savera, thank you for your question. So, look, I just want to explain something that probably everybody knows about it. So, I personally lived three different systems. So, there's the communism, socialism, and capitalism. Currently, today, we're living the capitalism, and it certainly has its own flaws. There's no doubt about that. And none of the other systems are perfect. So I want to bring the climate change back on track. But let me tell you something. Capitalism is something that's still working today, till today's date. You know, it certainly has its own flaws. Every 10 years, you have a recession. Now it's becoming smaller. Probably every 7 years or so, you have a recession. And whether it's a global recession or limited to certain territories. But for us to go ahead and integrate climate change phenomena with a complete system change, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense because we're changing a whole ecosystem because of climate change. Personally, I can't see the correlation. But I can tell you one thing, that if the existing ecosystem can understand what's happening with climate change and can really absorb the fact that climate change is basically happening, and it's happening so fast. In fact, we are in the middle of climate change right now. So then we have something that we can work on. We do have something on our plate by then that we can understand, and really we can exploit and find a solution, go down to the root cause of the problem and find a particular solution. So I truly hope this answers your question, because I know I keep hearing it every now and then from different webinars and from the people that I sit with and family members and friends. They say the same thing. And I ask them, so what is it that you want to replace it with? Like, give me something that can be replaceable with. And I still can't find a perfect answer. Even myself, I can't find the answer for that. So what I'm trying to say is that let's do the incremental change. And based on that incremental change, something will happen. This is the true story of a startup. They start from something, and out of nothing, something will happen eventually. Do I know what it is? I have no idea what it is. I don't know, but I prefer to stick with the existing system and work towards getting people to absorb climate change, to understand climate change, and to work towards finding solution for all the problems we're facing in climate change.
Thanks, Maher. You know, this ties back to what I was describing at the beginning in a way, which is this non-linear change moment that we're in, where we know as the old system breaks down, we don't actually have the answers. We don't have the blueprint for how to get to the new. All we can do is radically experiment as radically as we can within the current boundaries in a way to give us to start to create the pattern of the new that, you know, if you follow a tipping point theory, at some point emerges, but we can't actually predict when that new is going to emerge. You know, if you see like the previous non-linear change moments that we have, then that's the kind of context that we're in. And the way I see it is the kind of explosion of social entrepreneurship is life going through that experimentation process, realizing that stuff isn't working and really trying to search for new ways. And no one of those will have the solution, but somehow that act of collective experimentation and will to find something in the future leads to that tipping point where, you know, at some point that the system flips quickly and the next level, as it were, is downloaded. At least that's how I tell the story. So what I'd like to do is, we're getting to the end, so I'd like to give everybody one more chance to leave us with some wise words of wisdom. Tatiana was about to jump in, so why don't we do that? We'll go in reverse order of the speakers at the beginning. So Tatiana, you want to kick us off with your closing comments?
Nice catch. Yeah, I mean, I actually think the revolution is in our mind, and I don't agree that we don't have a blueprint. I think what I've definitely seen in the social entrepreneurship field for the last 10 years is it has advanced tremendously. So I know that I want water that's clean, that I can drink, that's like good for me. I know I want the food to be healthy. I know that I want, I want my communities to be safe. So to me, the blueprint is not that complicated. The question is how, and I think that you're right. There's a lot of experimentation to move towards that, but what we're going for in the end, right? And how we want to redefine that and how we work within the natural systems. So that's why I don't believe in embedding climate change in what we're doing. I believe it's the other way around. We need to be within our natural system. I think that that's there. That's there. And it just, we need more experiments to scale up and more people to let go, to be honest, of really old fashioned paradigms of capitalism and hang on to the money and hang on to making money off other people until we can actually finance that way forward. That's what I think is the gap. So I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to entertain anybody on that conversation.
Great. Thanks, Tatiana. Claudia.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I don't like the system in where I live. I would love to change it. I don't like the government system. I don't like the economic system. I don't like the social system that we are obliged to believe that it's the one who works, and it doesn't work. And it has proved for 20 years that doesn't work. So what I should do, what I can do is the great question, no? It seems very difficult when we see it as a whole, because I cannot change the world. I cannot even change Venezuela, but at least I can change what is close to me, my communities, the people do what I have influence on. And that's what I try to do. And as Tatiana was saying, I think we have a path. We have a clear path where we want to go. And we are all, as a movement of social entrepreneurs, we are trying to reach little by little, brick by brick, steps towards that final goal and building that better world that we all dream. But it's day by day, little by little, until we make a larger change. And that's what we are working for.
Great. Thanks, Claudia. Savera.
Yeah, I think just going off of kind of my definition or understanding of capitalism, I think, and the role of social entrepreneurs, I feel like currently we're in a system of a very primitive form of capitalism where our valuing of things, of extraction of resources is misplaced, and then it's built on it. So someone working with their hands is not valued as someone, spending 1 hour with, 10x, 12x their time. So it's, $3,000 an hour, whereas, a farmer won't get $1. I think someone mentioned it in the chat. So I think that I don't think we need to break down capitalism but I do think we need to look at, is our ideal, just radical profit maximization? In order to do that, do we need to externalize the planet and the planetary boundaries that we live within? So I think it's not an upheaval, but it's, composting or degrading the parts that don't serve us well, or questioning them at least. So, I mean, can we value things in exchange and, have markets for products? Absolutely. Do we have to value it the way we do currently? Absolutely not. And I think that's where social entrepreneurs can come in and play a role in trying to create value and work within a capitalist market, but also create value and give value to the communities they serve, from the producers that produce the products. So I think the current capitalist system is still quite primitive, hasn't been questioned, and I think that social entrepreneurs, I would like for it not to be called social entrepreneurs, but just called entrepreneurs. And it's not a sector in the economy; it is the economy. And I think that we're on our way in revaluing the way the systems work. And I think I'll keep it at that. Thank you for having me. This has been really, really stimulating.
Beautiful. Thanks for your contribution. Maher.
Right, Peter. So to be honest with you, I just want to get into our vision and mission statement as a company, and I can relate to what I want to say. So our vision and the core purpose of the company is to create opportunities for people so they can remain to be adventurous, prosperous, and free. Let me stay with free. Currently, right now, the existing system doesn't make any of us free. Truly, it doesn't. So we're being stuck to a system. But for us to do the change, So, and to create a positive change, to create a change with positive impact, with global impact. I truly believe that from our system, from a company perspective, from a private sector perspective, that the entrepreneurs of the future are the ones who are going to create this change. And the entrepreneurs of the future, whether they are social entrepreneurs or driven purely by profit, they are the right people who are going to create this change. And from our end as a company, we live up to this core purpose every single moment. And based on that, we try to graduate entrepreneurs who are going to create the change of the future. That's why I want to go back to Tatiana. She mentioned that she has the roadmap, the architecture or the blueprint. I really would like to see that. Hopefully, if we can get in on a different call later on and talk about that particular roadmap. I'll be honest with you, from my end, I don't have a roadmap. I really can't see the roadmap. I can't see it. Maybe because I am so stuck with what exists today. Maybe, I don't know. I'd love to see this roadmap. I truly believe that my pure instinct and the core purpose of our company is taking us in the right path. As a private sector, I can only say as a private sector, and this will eventually cause the ripple effect of change, not on a global level, but at least I will be one of the contributors that will cause this actual change.
Great, thanks, Maher. And yeah, last but not least, Sofia, wrap it up for us.
Yeah, well, thanks. I think this has been a really stimulating conversation. So thank you to everybody. I think we've really touched upon a lot of the ingredients that we need, to kind of build this blueprint, whether we have it or not. But the leadership side of things that really has to be, committed, the collective experimentation we can get from the social entrepreneurs, the changing pattern for investments, or how we measure investments, so that we don't only measure them in terms of outputs and financial gains, but that we measure our investments in terms of social benefit and public good, and define these common metrics together. And I love, Savera, what you were talking about also about the redefinition of values, and looking at how we value, people also as well, and transforming that. But I would actually like to end on a very positive note, and that's the aspect of youth and children. I come from Sweden, where we've seen the Greta effect this last year. And I really think that it's our children who are going to actually create a complete paradigm shift. They won't accept things that we have accepted for far too long. So that's the kind of positive note I would like to end this conversation on today.
Great. Thanks, Sofia. Yeah, thank you all very much. Remember, everybody, the conversation continues on the UbiVerse. So if you got any inspiration from this, feel free to share your ideas through a post there. The recording will be in the library of the Humanity Rising group on the UbiVerse, normally within a day or two. So feel free to go there, share it with others. And all that remains for me to do is to thank you all very much, and to hand over to Jim to wrap it up for us.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone. This has been a very stimulating discussion and debate. I really appreciated the breadth of the contributions, and the way that this really seminal question has been raised around capitalism, and whether it should be replaced coterminous with our efforts to deal with climate change and a range of other issues. And I think we'll be dealing with that in a couple of weeks. I think, Maher, the short answer to your question of what could replace it, I've been reading a Donut Economics by Kate Rayworth. I think that we're in fact going to be, between the 23rd and 28th of July, we're going to be really delving into donut economics, because I think we've come to the point in human history where we have to put human well-being at the center, not the accumulation of capital. And so I think a whole new way of understanding economics, a whole new way of understanding human identity, in my view, is imperative. And I would love to have you involved in those discussions because we want to have as many diverse points of view. But I think, the fact that the city of Amsterdam and now Copenhagen have embraced donut economics as a way they want to shape the post-pandemic world is an extraordinary achievement, and augurs well for the capacity of humanity at this crucial time to move forward in the way that's required given the radically shifting circumstances. And one of the things we've seen with the pandemic is humanity has an amazing capacity to shapeshift dramatically in a very short period of time. So I think we're seeing the efficacy of something beyond incremental change, but something that is more systems change in a very short period of time. And but this is all part of the richness of our dialogue from day to day. And I'll keep you posted on the sessions coming up, and would love to have you involved. I want to just tease out two quick things as we close. One is, I was very struck, Claudia, by your notion of the distinction between resilience and anti-fragility. That's a new thought for me. That's the first time this has arisen in our dialogues, and I just want to note it and thank you for it. Because as soon as you made that distinction, I thought, yeah, that's right. It's one thing to be resilient. It's another thing, which we've got to learn in the pandemic, to be anti-fragile. and Peter, we ought to think about this, and I don't know whether that's a longer discussion, but it's a category of distinction that I think is well worth deeper contemplation. So maybe I'll be in touch with you separately, both around Venezuela. I think we would love to hear something more about Venezuela, but also about anti-fragility. And then Sofia, I was struck by your sense of impact measurement. And I think that's a very rich vein that we might consider as a deeper dive somewhere down the line, because as Tatiana, with Amsterdam Hub, the more we're getting out there into this new territory, sort of beyond capitalism or reshaping capitalism and really just thinking out of the box, the more we need to start thinking about how we qualify and quantify the successes that we're involved in. I mean, just thinking about donut economics, how do you start measuring human well-being? We all know how to measure capital accumulation. What are the indicators about human well-being and planetary constraints that are replicable globally? It's a very, very, very interesting subject. Tatiana, your final question on, what is growth under current circumstances? What does growth mean when you've reached the limits of the carrying capacity of the globe? And all of a sudden, as the Club of Rome reminded us, we've got constraints here. What's that relationship? That's a huge question that I think humanity hasn't even begun to really grapple with, because we're so focused on growth, and we're being now compelled to deal with limits. And how we wrestle through that is a really important issue. And these are all the kinds of issues that Humanity Rising wants to flesh out over time. So part of what I've been doing, you know, over 52 days with Peter is to tease these out so that we can deepen the dialogue. And Maher's been on a couple of panels and others. And Savera, your take on what's going on in Sri Lanka is extremely important. We put a lot of time and energy into Sri Lanka. I've been there, you know, maybe a half a dozen times, have an apartment there that I stay at in Colombo. There's a lot that we're doing. Sri Lanka is on the verge of really taking some leadership in education in Asia around soft skills. So I want to appreciate all of your contributions, and I'll probably circle back to various of you to think about other panels that we can be convening down the road. And then tomorrow, day 53, we'll be dealing with Roger Tempest and Pager Paris Ackrell from Broughton Hall in England, in Yorkshire, that have built an incredibly beautiful ecosystem to really talk about the ecosystems and the light centers of the future. Peter will again be moderating that panel. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you here again tomorrow, same time, same station, 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. CET on Humanity Rising. Bye.